Before we begin this episode, I want everyone to know that due to current world events, some of the information that was originally recorded for this episode has changed. After speaking with my guest about it, we agreed that we would still release the episode in full, but with some additional information at the end to describe how things have changed for them in light of COVID-19. Enjoy. Hi there, and welcome to the Pondering Dan podcast, where we talk all things teaching, education, pedagogy, and technology. I'm your host, Danny Summerall, and if you're new to the show, make sure you leave a review and share with your peers. Connect with me on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Pondering Dan, as well as at ponderingdan.com. My guest today on the Pondering Dan podcast is Dan Martinez. Dan is an educator from the Gold Coast, Australia. With close to 20 years in the classroom, he's spent time developing STEM and STEAM-focused curriculum and projects for schools, as well as developing one-to-one BYO iPad programs. Being someone that loves technology, Dan has engaged students with coding, robotics, drones, and most recently, esports. In fact, esports has become an integral part of Dan's life, with him starting the Federation of United Schools Esports Cup, or the Fuse Cup for short, Australia's premier school esports competition for younger gamers. Welcome, Dan.
Hey, Danny, how are you going?
Yeah, I'm really good. I'm excited about our chat today, actually.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me on. I was
No,
very excited, a bit nervous, but no, absolutely
no.
excited to have a chat with you and talk about esports.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really good chat, and I think a lot of people will learn a lot of different things about esports, including, what the educational value is, which I'm looking forward to sharing that. So, but First of all, before we do, I want you to tell us all about the Fuse Cup and how it came about.
Yeah, so I was having a chat with a friend of mine a little while ago, and we were talking about just how we've always kind of been gaming and into games, and he, reminded me that the very first thing I actually saved up for, and I'm going to show my age here, was a Atari 2600 when I was a young kid. So I started a bit of a car washing business and went around to all the cars and houses in my street and washed them, and then my families, and saved up enough money to buy my old Atari 2600 with a few games. And it's always just been something that's been a passion of mine, and it's never really gone away. And as I've grown up, the gaming aspect has kind of fallen to the side, where it's become more of a social aspect. So I've got a core group of mates who we've been playing, online with each other for, or not really online, but we've been playing games for about 20 years. And it started off with, face to face, like we'd always go to each other's houses. And then obviously with the internet and things developing online, we continued doing that even while we're living in different parts of, of the globe. So it's been a real social aspect for us. And for guys, it's, we don't often really talk openly about our feelings, but when we're gaming, we divulge a lot of stuff to each other. So it's a really good outlet for our mental health. And then, being an educator and looking at different things happening and keeping my eye on esports, it became really clear to me that younger kids play as well, but there wasn't really an avenue for them to participate or contribute or represent their schools. There's competitions for older gamers, but nothing for younger kids. So I thought, well, surely there's something that I can structure around gaming for younger students, but use it as a way to teach them about their digital well-being, which can be very lacking at times.
That's interesting that you talk about the mental health aspect of it. It's something that I never thought about before we had this chat, actually. And I guess that all comes to that digital well-being as well. Would you agree?
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's like one of the biggest reasons why we developed the Fuse Cup. It's because, showing kids how to game or how to do it responsibly is really important, because often kids will play for excessive hours, or they'll play to the detriment of other things in their life. And what they don't realize is they're actually setting up really negative and not very positive gaming behaviors that can be detrimental. So if we can show them early on that, hey, it's great to play games, it's great to play online. However, these are some core things that you really need to consider when doing so. If we can teach that lesson earlier on, then hopefully they won't get into better problems down the track.
Yeah. And I'm sure that helps a lot of parents who don't know what to do with their kids that are spending a lot of time gaming.
Absolutely. And, that's one of the things that has been really interesting to see the parents once you discuss why we're doing the Fuse Cup and what the social and what the digital wellbeing aspects are. That paradigm really shift for parents.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. That is. So with esports still being, I guess you could say it's still in its early days in Australia, right? So
Yeah,
apart
within
from that,
education, yeah.
yeah. So how are you convincing people of its educational value?
Well, I mean, we treat it as a sport. So, what are the educational merits of sport? Well, there's
Mm,
great, inclusion, there's teamwork, there's strategy, there's the ability to get along with each other and communicate effectively. And these are all prevalent in esports as well. But then you tie in things like decision making, reaction time, and you know things like integrity. Saying that you're going to be at certain places, you're going to be at training when you say you're going to be at training, or resilience. How do you deal with a loss? How do you deal with it effectively? These are the things that are really important, and these are strategies and life skills that students need to develop, whether it's through traditional sports or through esports. So,
mm,
and then we talk about obviously the digital well-being. Obviously, kids are going to be playing games, and they're going to continue to do so more and more as they grow.
mm,
Esports isn't going anywhere; it's only getting more popular. So, we really need to show them how to do it in a responsible and safe manner.
mm. And I think you only need to look on YouTube to see how many views these gaming videos are getting now. They're phenomenal amounts. Like they're
Yeah,
bigger than your huge pop stars of the world. With their
yeah,
music
absolutely.
videos. It's actually
Did you know?
incredible.
Did you know that more people in the US watch esports than they watch NBA? It's
Really?
got bigger viewership than the NBA.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
I
it's
can see
incredible.
why. I can see why people are starting to invest money now in these esports programs.
Mm, mm,
So I'm thinking about. I've had a little bit of exposure through my school. They started esports last year, and they're actually part of the Fuse Cup. One thing that I'm interested to know is, obviously with the schools that you're working with, what their programs are like as far as, are they teaching it as clubs? Are they teaching it as a subject in school? With mine, it is a subject for, I think it's year 9 and 10 students, or year 9, 10,
mm.
11. And they do everything from design their own mouse pads to their own banners to their own shirts and things like that. So there's a lot of graphic design sort of stuff involved with that. But what sort of things are you seeing as you're going around and visiting schools?
Yeah, it's a great question. And what I'm seeing is really diverse. So some schools are treating it purely as a co-curricular and doing
Yeah,
after school training. Some schools are incorporating it into lunchtime activities. Um, some schools are going down the route that your school's going down. In fact, I visited a school recently here in Brisbane, and it's a year 11 and 12 subject, and they tie a lot of commerce and legal into it as well. So they look at
yeah,
copyright, and they look at streaming and different kind of things that issues that can arise from that. But in fact, that particular school, the project that the year 11 and 12 kids are doing is that they are taking over the Fuse Cup and running it in their school. So they're a host
yeah,
school, and the year 12 kids, year 11 and 12 kids are planning the entire thing. So they're doing promo videos, they're doing, as you said, banners, mouse pads, jerseys. They're designing the whole works. They're doing a digital social media marketing campaign. They're costing the event. And yeah, the teacher's really just supervising while these year 11 and 12 students are pretty much running the whole show.
yeah.
So
That's
that's
unreal.
that's their assessment piece.
Yeah, no, that's
From
brilliant.
how do you put together an event from from go to woe, pretty much.
Yeah, and there's a ton of learning involved with that. I mean, you could
Loads.
you could rattle off 20 things. And I'm just, you just reminded me as well, when I've seen the esports competitions at our school before, we usually have a group of students running the live, I've lost the word in my head now, but the commentation, like,
Yeah,
you know,
the shoutcasting.
yeah, and even
Yeah,
interviewing the players as they finish. And
yeah,
that's huge. And a lot of these kids are generally the ones that don't like English. They don't love those speaking and listening tasks. They don't like writing. They don't like reading. Yet here
yeah,
these
yeah.
kids are creating questions and interviewing people, and it's
Yeah,
actually
it's amazing,
powerful.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like one of the stories from a little while ago that I visited a school. Same thing, they had a very disengaged student who had some issues in regards to behavior and some choices, but loved gaming. So they made him the esports coach. So
Yeah.
he's a year 9 student and he has to coach a year 5 and 6 team. I said it's completely turned around his focus, his attendance, his attitude, his behavior. Um, Same thing, completely switched on, engaged in class because he knows that if he drops a ball, he loses the only thing that's really important to him. So some schools are using it for a positive behavior program as well. And, often those kids who can be disengaged just need something to spark their interest and something that is really important to them. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I've found. We talk about school connectedness and, that notion of students perform better in schools that they feel supported by. And how better to support students and to actually show them that you care about the things they care about.
Yeah.
And you provide them with the opportunity to participate in the things they love at school as well as outside of school.
Mm. It's and that's no different really with a lot of these disengaged students who really engage with physical sports as well,
Yeah,
is it?
yeah, exactly.
And you could probably say that you could probably take this a lot further, and maybe your general sports programs at school could probably take a leaf out of the esports booklet with the things that you're doing. So yeah.
Yeah, potentially, especially that. I mean, there's some great traditional sport programs, whether it's, the CEDA program in Melbourne, which takes AFL students, or there's also a soccer federation one as well that takes students who want a career in football.
Mm.
And, they do exclusive training, but then they also look at, sports management and a whole bunch of different things. So, yeah, there are some organizations that do a very great job of that with traditional sports. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I remember originally talking about esports with someone a long time ago, and they were a bit critical of it. They were a bit dubious of, what's so good about gaming and sports. And I remember saying, look, I don't know a lot about it myself, but I'd like to go into it with an open mind and see where the
Mm.
educational value is. So that sort of goes to my next question for you, and thinking about some of the biggest criticisms that you've faced in getting esports off the ground, and if you've faced those criticisms, how you've dealt with that.
Yeah, look, so far it's been very positive. I think it's all about timing, and I think there are a lot of innovative schools who see merit and value in esports and want to engage their students more. Um, so it's been probably about 90% positive in my experience of trying to engage schools. There have been the odd school here or there who just don't want to listen and don't want a bar of it. Um, so I've really kind of got them to, again, as you said, just trying to have an open mind about it and think about it from a well-being point of view, think about it from a social inclusion point of view, and
Mm.
the fact that everybody can participate in esports. It's not a physical ability. It's literally anybody can do it. Anyone can be part of it. Obviously there'll be different levels of skill,
Mm.
but it's very much a very inclusive type of activity, and it's one that students love, and students all love it. In my opinion, and what I've seen, there's a high proportion of students who are really actively engaged in esports. So you've already got them you've already got their interest. But in saying that, I've looked at mapping it to the Australian curriculum, and it actually falls beautifully in line with the general capabilities around social and emotional well-being.
Yeah.
I looked at, all the ICT general capabilities, and there's not much in there. There's really not much in there at all. But it's all about, teamwork and social inclusion and emotional regulation, resilience. And these are the things that are really important in any community. And sometimes in schools, those general capabilities seem to be brushed over. It's like, well, kids might learn it through osmosis. Well, it doesn't kind of work that way
Mm.
unless you really teach students how to regulate, or how to show resilience and how to be inclusive. So esports is a really good fit for that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've already touched a lot on the digital well-being aspect. Have you seen, obviously you've got a lot of resources and a lot of information on the Fuse Cup website. If you've got a teacher that's starting out, and looking at esports and maybe just doing it as a club to start with, what would you say to them about the digital well-being aspect of it all? As in its importance and how they can teach it, and
Mm.
where to start, I suppose.
I guess the best place to start would be with the values of the cup. Um, So looking at, what are the core values of participating in sport, or in this particular case, in the Fuse Cup. So we talk a lot about integrity, and that's making students accountable and students taking responsibility for their own, you know, accountabilities. Really. So if they say they're going to do something, or say they're going to be somewhere, that they're actually there. And also, the way in which they respect each other. So I think that falls under integrity quite well. Then we talk about strength, and that's not physical, but obviously, their mental strength, or their ability to be resilient and deal with losses and competitive situations positively. Also, the ability to include others, and regardless of who they are, show good sportsmanship. One of the key things that students have to do, ours is a face-to-face competition, so there's no online component. So they have to physically shake hands with opponents. They have to wish each other good luck, and win, lose or draw. They have to shake hands at the end of the game and say good game. And it's just part of that, building in those values that are really important. And then obviously teamwork. Being an encouraging team member, and just like other sports, if you're engaged in a sport, often you require your teammates to communicate effectively to you, because you may not see things. You've got that tunnel vision, if you will, in the sports environment. And esports is the same. So being able to communicate effectively with the team and work strategically as part of a team is really important. So they're 4 core values that are a really good starting place. And then you talk about things like behaviors and player expectations, and how do we expect you to behave at school and at home when you're participating in esports, and then when you're representing your school, because obviously representing your schools is a privilege, and there's a lot of students who'd love to do it as well. So really tying in that sense of pride and that sense of belonging. And then it would go as far as then looking at the actual digital well-being, looking at, well, how often do you play, how long do you play for, do you have scheduled breaks, what's your sleep like, do you factor in no screen time before sleep? Is your gaming getting in the way of other activities? So just looking at the holistic approach to gaming, and looking at really encouraging that balanced lifestyle.
Yeah. I love that that's an important message that you try to drive home with kids as well, all around digital well-being. And I reckon that there's probably a lot of parents out there that might listen to this and say, well, actually, how do I get my kid to sign up to esports now? Because
Yeah.
they might not know how to teach that. So
yeah, and the really cool thing that the kids don't know until they get it is, in their player contract, their parents have to sign it, and it clearly stipulates what the expectations are at home. So some kids think, oh, great, I'm in esports, I can go home and play for 5 hours and tell mum and dad I've got to get, I've got training to do. And it actually doesn't work that way at all. So it really articulates, this doesn't mean playing more. It actually means being more productive with your playing time.
yeah.
And just talking to professional esports players, they shudder at the fact that kids will play continuously for 6 or 7 hours. Like, they don't do that. There's no way you can be effective if you're playing for that stint of time. So what we try and do is get tips from the pros, and then pass that down to students and say, look, this is what the professional esports athletes do. So if you want to emulate that, you really need to start thinking about looking after looking after your digital well-being.
Yeah. No, excellent. Would you, like, if you're starting an esports program at a school, would you get parents all in and sort of try to download all that information together at once? Or would you just hope and expect that the parents would be reading those contracts as they come home, which they probably wouldn't if it was just, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a double-edged sword, can't it?
Yeah.
Although I did visit one school here who had a parent information session to start off with, and they really made it very clear, look, this is what we're doing. This is the the digital well-being aspects that are really important. And this is why we're taking this approach. So they had buy-in from the parents at the beginning, and then the parents said, look, can we actually come to training? So they had morning training sessions, and the parents turned up in like Space Invaders and Zelda t-shirts and all kinds of really cool stuff.
That's great.
Yeah, so the parents are part of that, part of that process, and a lot of the research that's come out, talks about that more and more parents are playing esports with their kids.
Yeah.
As a way of bonding, and a way as spending time together and doing activities that they both really enjoy.
Well, and you probably find a lot of parents, like you when you were younger, they enjoyed their gaming time as well. So it's
Yeah,
probably a good way for them to sort of get back in touch with their youth perhaps and,
yeah,
relive a bit of that.
or share some time with their kids. Like, one of
Or
my,
yeah.
I got two sons and a daughter, and one of my sons is a Marvel nut, loves it. So if he's really good, we might play the Lego Marvel game together for 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Or as a family, we might play Just Dance. It can be a bit competitive, so we teach kids about being respectful and
No rage quitting if dad wins.
Tell you what, you should see Dad's dad moves. I don't think I don't think that's a problem. I don't think I'm going to win anything.
At least you can say it with a smile on your face.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to know your limits, right?
That's right. So you've already touched a little bit on the general capabilities.
Yep.
And we talked a little bit about, those kids that aren't really into their reading, writing and maths. And I guess as far as, the general curriculum goes, there's a lot of places this fits really, isn't there?
I mean, you just think about the depth of detail in some of these open world games. You could use that as a creative writing task easily.
Yeah.
You could look at the mechanics behind a soccer game for physics at a higher level. There's loads of maths applications that you could look at. If you wanted to look at the money side of esports, you could use that purely for economic point of view.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so much, and things like Minecraft EDU is a perfect example of what was a game that's now turned into a massive educational tool.
Yeah, and it's a powerful tool too.
Absolutely.
I love the thought of giving a group of year 5 or 6 kids, the job of creating an event, and what they would find out on their own, really, by organizing something like that. We can use this space to do it and we can use this projector. Yes, but do you have to book that space? Is it going to cost you money? Are you going to have to charge people to come to your event? And
who are you going to have to email to talk to about that? Whose approval do you need?
Yeah. And then that becomes the teacher's job just to ask those right questions, and the students are figuring out the answers.
Yeah, you could, one school that I visited said, look, could we use a Fuse Cup as a $20 boss project and build a business around, running smaller esports events in our school for fundraising? I'm like, that's a great idea.
Yeah, that is a great idea.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dan, how has COVID-19 changed what's happening with the Fuse Cup?
Well, it's completely made us rethink how we're going about our business. Obviously, our preference was to run a face-to-face competition, and that's what we had as our point of difference for an esports competition across the country. And we were really clear in that's what we wanted to do. We wanted a face-to-face competition so students could interact in the physical environment and make it as competitive and as like a normal sport, if you will. We wanted to emulate that, but obviously with COVID-19, all of that just changed. Schools were cancelling left, right, and centre and pulling out of competitions all across the country, and we held on for as long as we could to make a call on whether we were going to go ahead. But obviously, the right thing to do was postpone. But then it left this massive gap with schools, wanting to participate but not, and then having a whole bunch of students miss out on all kinds of things. And from a financial point of view as well, we're looking at our revenue stream completely drying up overnight. So we thought, oh, geez, what are we going to do about this? But, one of the things that I've learned about educators and being one for so long is, if nothing else, we're resourceful and we're flexible and we can think on our feet quite quickly. And I think that's something we take for granted because you make a million decisions every day and you don't think about it because it's second nature. So, we thought, well, why don't we just do this online? Like, why don't we trial it? Why don't we see how it goes? And we'll take away the onus of competition and we'll take away the prizes and we'll just make it a fun thing to do. And yeah, it's been great. We've rolled it out. We've had 3 competitions. The feedback has been fantastic. A bit of troubleshooting with Wi-Fi in schools and networks not responding, but it actually works quite well with Bluetooth in the right spot, in the hotspotting. So for us, what it's made us do is really pivot. It's not something we're going to do long term. Obviously, our preference is face-to-face competitions. So once that resumes, we'll be doing that again. But at the moment, what we're having to do is look at different ways of doing our competition, and that's the beauty of esports, is that it's fundamentally an online competition, or has been, and then they've obviously moved to a more face-to-face kind of format. So for us, we're just kind of going back to what we would have been doing a long time ago, which is online. But yeah, it's been a real challenge. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you've got some online comps coming up, right?
Yeah, so we've got a teachers and parents competition, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So teachers racing teachers and parents racing teachers. So we've got a series of those coming up. The first one starts on Saturday, the 4th of April, and you can check that out on our Facebook page. We'll have links to the competition. We've even got a couple of battle posters with teachers and parents looking pretty tough.
Pretty sure my face is in one of those posters, right?
It sure is. So yeah, we've got that coming up. Then we're also, whenever school starts, whatever that looks like, we'll be running our school's online competition. Hopefully, when school starts again, whenever that is, schools will be a lot more. I'm hoping that they'd be into going to excursions and competing, but I fear that they won't. I think that they'll be pretty much starting and still having restrictions on what they're doing. So we'll run our online competitions in that space. And then we have, at the moment, we've got a new online course that we wrote with the Kids Helpline for students. And it focuses on digital wellbeing and cyber safety and, cyberbullying and aspects of esports. And then once the students complete that, they get a certificate. And if they've got a Nintendo Switch, they get an access code to participate in an online competition. So we've got a whole bunch of different online components that we're running. So it's a teachers and parents, the schools, and the teachers and the students competition. And that's kind of what we're doing in the meantime until we can work out when we can resume our face-to-face competitions in schools.
Yeah, excellent. So I'm guessing that for all the information about those parent-teacher ones, as well as the upcoming online ones for students as well, all that information is just on thefusecup.com?
Yeah, if you go to thefusecup.com/competitions, that whole section is devoted to pretty much all the online competitions we're running. So we've absolutely put a hold on our face-to-face competitions, but we've obviously launched a whole bunch of online ones now.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I know I'm looking forward to being part of an esports competition. I never have before. I know I got my daughter to partake recently with one of your trial ones, which was pretty cool for her. She loved that. So my turn now. So if teachers or schools want to get involved with esports, and in particular the Fuse Cup, what do they need to do? Who do they need to talk to? Where do they go?
So the best place to go to is our website, which is thefusecup.com.au.
Yeah.
And there's a whole bunch of information there around digital wellbeing and our values, things about the way the structured, the way it runs. So we run competitions we've got competitions in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, Adelaide, and then 5 in Queensland. So we're pretty ahead of the game up here in Queensland.
Yeah, it seems so.
Yeah, and then what happens is students play at a local competition and they work out who that winner is, and it's a structured kind of environment where you progress to the next round and so forth. We're partnered with JB Hi-Fi Solutions, which has been great. So they've been able to provide a bundle called the Fuse Cup Pack, where schools can buy everything they need in one go, so they don't have to go shopping around for different, hardware. And that's the other really cool thing. It's a great starting point for schools. A lot of schools might be interested, but they don't really know much about hardware, and PC gaming hardware can be quite, scary for them. Whereas what we've developed is literally a plug and play system where you buy a Nintendo Switch, some games, plug it into a TV, and off you go.
Okay.
I think the Fuse Cup Pack comes in at under $700. So, for that amount, you've got a pretty much ready to go esports system, and then there's a registration to be part of our national competition.
Yeah, and I guess in the greater scheme of things, when you consider how much schools are spending on technology these days, when it comes down to, one-to-one devices or even robotics and even down to Lego, it's not really a lot in the whole scheme of things. So
not especially when you think about how many students can participate as well.
yeah,
So you can have, loads of kids involved. As there's 3 competitions a year, you can have different kids every term as well. So yeah, it's a pretty cost-effective way to kind of dip your toe in the esports water and see if you like it.
yeah, yeah. No, it's pretty exciting to see. I know the Fuse Cup's pretty new, and already you're doing amazing things, Dan, and it's pretty exciting to think about where you're going to go with this. And already there's so many schools involved, and you already seem like you've been running this for years, but really it's you're a startup at the moment, right?
Pretty
Yeah,
much, yeah.
yeah,
We're 2 months old.
yeah.
But
That's brilliant.
that's what's so powerful about the ADE and the Microsoft Innovative Educator Network. We're connected to really great people who want to do good things, who see value in innovative projects and understand that different things are important to different people. So being able to tap into those networks and through various Twitter contacts as well, it's been great to kind of connect everyone and get everyone on board.
Yeah. And I didn't mention that before, but that's how we knew each other. I think we knew each other through Twitter first and then met through ADE in real life, which was, and I'm the same. I talk about Twitter a lot actually on this podcast, but people are getting the message that it's really powerful. It's a powerful place to meet innovative educators.
Massively. Yeah. I mean, I only really use Twitter for that. I don't use it for a social kind of thing. I just use it professionally.
Yeah.
And it's just been great allowing me to connect with similar like-minded educators. That makes you feel like you're not alone. Sometimes you can be at your school trying to do some great stuff and you might come across some blockers, and sometimes if you don't have a bigger idea of what's happening in education, it can be a bit isolating. So it's just great to connect with other people who want to do good things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, speaking of Twitter, you are on Twitter. It's Martinez Geek. Am I right?
Yep.
Appropriate name for you, is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, you've got
the Fuse Cup one.
Yeah, which is just at the Fuse Cup. That's also Instagram too, right?
Yep, and LinkedIn as well.
And LinkedIn, you're on all the socials. Not TikTok yet.
No, I might pass that on to someone else. Maybe you can do our TikTok, Dave.
Oh, I don't know if I'm ready for that yet, but that's where all the kids are these days. So, So, well, thank you so much for being part of the show today, Dan. I'm really glad that you've got to share this message, and I'm hoping that people really take on board the educational value with esports, and I obviously wish you all the best with it.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's been awesome, being on. And as I said, it's, we've spoken about esports before, you and I, and then you've started this podcast, which is fantastic. And it's so good. I love listening to it and hearing all the great stories you're sharing. So thank you for having me on. It's been great. It's actually my first podcast, Danny.
Oh, there you go. That's awesome. I feel privileged. There you go. Thank you. So if you've got any questions for Dan or I about today's episode, obviously you can email me at dan@ponderingdan.com, but also get in touch with Dan at the Fuse Cup, which I'll link his details in the description for this episode. But you can just go to thefusecup.com.au and you'll have all the information you need there. And once again, if you want to help this podcast grow, please like it, subscribe to it, rate it, and share it. And before we go, Dan, do you have any parting words?
It's just, esports is one of those things that is only going to get bigger over time, and more people will kind of get involved and start seeing the educational value. So it's an opportunity to get in early. And understand what it's really about. So if that is of interest to you, just get in contact with me at the Fuse Cup and we can chat about how that works.
Yeah, awesome. Hopefully you get a few people contacting you. So that would be great.
Great, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I hope you've enjoyed what you've heard today. Tune in next week for more conversations around education. I'm your host, Danny. Until then, look after yourself. Bye.